Hello and welcome back. I'm ShyWizard. Going to take a look at advanced animal prefab for Farming Simulator 17. So what I want to do is a tutorial here on how to put this into a map. This is not a mod, as it specifically states down here. It must be built into the map through Giant Editor. Well, it doesn't specifically say Giant Editor, but that's the only way you can do it really. Advanced animal prefab. It's possible to create additional animal nav meshes. Bringing further animal pastures to play, gives you statistics for your animals, all the rest of it, bits and pieces. Now, I've spoken to a few different people, and including RC Devil, and at the moment I don't have access to other animals besides what we already have within the giant structure, so cows, pigs, sheep, and chicken, I guess, if you want to do the chicken, but I'm going to leave the chicken out for now at least. May do a video on that with try and incorporate with the enhanced chicken mod. Don't know yet, we'll see how far that goes down the road, but for now I'm going to work with the cows. I may do others, not sure yet. Once you've done one of them, I think the rest will come into play and you'll know where to go from there, but we'll see how far we get with it. I've got a Goldcrest Valley edit which I'm going to be playing around with. I've created a large area where Field 31 used to be, or was, whatever, by the animal market, just to make it really easy for testing purposes and whatever else. I'll put a link in the description to this page, but it's literally on the Farming Simulator mod hub under prefab. Really easy to find, but I will put a link anyway. So I've gone ahead and downloaded this, and we'll have a quick look in here first of all to give you an idea of what's going on. These parts are just to, for the actual mod. I know it's not a mod, but the actual mod itself, the prefab, these are just sort of XML here explaining what bits do, and then you've got an icon and stuff like that. But what we really want to concentrate here is the actual XML for the mod desk. So we've got some example text in here where we need to take that to work with our cows, so we're going to do that. And then there's some instructions in here, some stuff in here in various different languages. Good advice, back up your map. I'm going to use the GRLE convert, which I've got on my desktop here, to convert the info layer GRLE to a PNG, so we can then increase our channels from 4 to 16 to give us access to a larger number of bits which are used to create our nav meshes. So at the moment we only have 0 to 3, we're going to increase that up to 7. So 0 to 3 for our standard animals, and then 4 to 7 for whatever else you want to bring in. We're going to register our animal species using the triggers, and using triggers, but we're going to register them using some scripts and the mod desk to do that. And then obviously we're going to need an animal trailer, but I don't know if it'll be obvious whether I'll actually do that part or not. Yeah, I'm not sure. Might do. We'll see how far we get with it. But there's that information there, and this is obviously, this part here is important because that is what is required to increase your channels from 4 to 16 to give us our extra bits for our nav meshes and whatever else. We'll come back to that later on. So some examples in here to do with your animal dealer, animal load trigger. We've got an animal zone load trigger and a cow 2 example set up here. So and we've also got an XML. Now, one thing I did actually come across with this, when I tried to use this particular XML, it wouldn't work, and I contacted RC Devil and asked him what was going on, and he said if that you were using any in-game animals, not to use this XML. This is just an example for additional animals which may be coming in the future. I don't have access to any of those. It has been tested, from my knowledge, or from what I know and what I've heard, has been tested. This particular advanced animals script setup has been tested with other animals. What they are, I have no idea. But for any in-game stuff, then you don't use this one. You just use the standard XML that's already there and set up in your husbandry stuff on the map already. So we're going to ignore that XML because it's not required, doesn't work as it is, at least for in-game animals anyway. So if we if I open up this example here for the cow 2, We'll have a quick look through here. So we've got a transform group, cow2 husbandry, and we've got some parts in here to do with our gameplay. So all of this is to do with your triggers, planes, moving planes and stuff like that, nav mesh, which we'll have to recreate anyway for the map, and whatever else. We've got some visual parts in here for our cow stable and bits and pieces, exactly the same as what you'll have on your map. If you've got any Goldcrest Valley stuff used, then this is what it will look like. And then we have an animal loading trigger, which is obviously for our cow 2 and whatever else. I'm going to probably play around with that a little bit and move that or do something with that, but so it's set up a little differently for the map. But for this example, obviously it needs to be here because that's, you know, otherwise it just wouldn't look right, I guess. But all of this stuff basically matches what we've got already in Goldcrest Valley and any other map that's got cow husbandry on it. So your structure is going to be exactly the same. Obviously the husbandry transform group up here is going to be called cow husbandry or cows husbandry, not cow2 husbandry, but otherwise everything else there is the same, and our user attributes over here are going to be exactly the same again, other than the actual type name, which is normally cow, and this is cow2 because we're registering cow2 as our additional setup. Again, ignore the XML for now because that's going to be changed. So there's the example there. I would not recommend that you import this. I think somewhere it tells you not to do that, or at least I seem to have read somewhere, or I may have been told by somebody, I don't know, not to import this. You need to actually build the structure up yourself. This is just an example, and to only be used an example. It's not actually to be imported into the map. Same with all the others. So your triggers here and stuff like that, these are not to be actually imported into the map. They are just literally there for example use only, in how you go about setting up your triggers in the map and stuff like that. So I would probably just, you know, go with that and not import them. Just open them up and then have a look and see how they're structured, and then create whatever you need to create on your map separately, and don't use these. So don't import these into your map through GE, because they are literally there just as examples. So we've got some scripts, so we'll obviously need to put these into an appropriate folder and then set all that stuff up as well. So we'll have a look at that and whatever else. So I've got my Goldcrest Valley edit here, which I've created an area. What I'm going to do first of all, before we get into too deep with the actual building of the mod structure and everything else, and I'm going to keep calling it a mod because it is a mod, but you know, it's not one you can just put in your mods folder. You have to integrate it into the map through Giants Editor. I should refer to it as prefab, but that just doesn't make sense to me. So so I'm going to actually recreate my GRLE first of all. So if we come back into our instructions here, it tells us to find the info layer GRLE. So we're going to do that, which is this one here. And if I open this folder up, which has got it's got the GRLE converter in here, I'll get rid of that because that's something else I was playing with. And then we're going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally take this and just drag and move it into this folder, and then I'm going to come up to I'm going to bring it up and hover over the convert command, and it clearly says there open with convert.command, and I'm going to release. It will then open it up and it will run the actual bat file and then do all its thing and whatever else, and it will create my PNG. So I'm going to do like so, and it's now created my info layer PNG. So now I can go Control X, come back over to my Mat01 folder and paste it in. You could take this from this folder and then just drag it out and it will make a new PNG, but you end up then having to delete this anyway or move it from there anyway. So I just find it easier to move it straight out of that folder into the converter folder, create your PNG within here, and then just drag the PNG over or cut and paste it like I just have. Just saves a little bit of time, but whichever way works for you. Don't need that anymore, so we can close that down. I'm going to go to my mat01.i3d. This may be called something different for you, depending on the map author or creator or whatever else, how they've decided to set it up. If we look at our instructions again, it says to, what does it say? Search for the following lines. So info layer name, info layer. So we're just going to take the info layer there make a copy of that, come over to here, Control F to bring up the search window, paste it in, click find. We don't want that one, what we want is the actual layer itself. So we're going to go down until we get to this one here. For me this is on line 2488, may be different for you. And you can see here we have info layer, field ID 39, num channels 4. And if we look at our instructions, everything else there matches what we have in here. It does say that the file ID may be different, and that is true, it may be different for your map. This is again Goldcrest Valley Edit, so that's probably where this information was taken from. What we need to do is increase our num channels from 4 to 16. So you can do whatever you want there. You can just copy that, or you can come into here and just type it in. Which I'm going to do that like so. So with our info layer, we've increased the num channels up to 16 from 4. Click save, close it down. There we go, done. Nice and easy. Then we open this up in Giants Editor. And then what we're going to do is click save. We're not going to make any further changes. With the console open, if this isn't open, just go window and console. And then this will show you any errors. So if the GRLE conversion hasn't worked properly, or whatever else, or if, I don't know, whatever it might be, it may throw up an error in here. If it does, make sure you fix the error first before you go any further, because you'll end up with lots of problems later on. Even if everything seems to work now, later on, once you actually get it all built in and get it into game, it may fall over and not work properly. So any errors, make sure you fix them before you go any further. So like I said, I'm just going to click save. This will now allow Giants Editor, or the engine, or whatever it is, to then recreate my GRLE for me. So we can close that down. If I go back into my map01 folder, we now have a new info layer GRLE. We can delete the PNG, we no longer require it. Now this has got the info layer GRLE has got increased a number of channels, so it allows us to have a greater number of nav meshes. Fantastic. So a few different ways you can do this when you actually build it and put it all into your map and whatever else. Entirely up to you. I'm going to do it the way I find is easy for me, and then we'll just see where we end up from there. Okay, so to try and save a little bit of time here, I've already gone ahead and built the area. And all I've done here really is I've gone into the Goldcrest Valley transform group, and under locations we have cow enclosure, which we already know is here. If you've played on this map, we have our cow enclosure, which basically includes the sort of storage area there, fenced area, and a little sort of shed, whatever that is. And that's it really. We don't have anything else in that sort of set. Well, that's not true actually. We do. We have some water, like brush things there, and the milk robot thing there. But otherwise that's it as far as I know. Yeah, pretty sure it is. So all I've done is I've just made a duplication of that, which you will see down here. And I've re-zeroed everything, or at least the gizmo side of things, so that the if we actually look at the original one, if I click on that one, the gizmo is zeroed to the map. What I've done is I've actually zeroed the gizmo to the building structure here, just so it was easier to move around. I won't get into all of that sort of stuff today, because that involves using the freeze transformation part of GE, and that can be a little bit weird at times, so I don't really want to get into that in this particular video, because it may not work the same for you. So but I just wanted to try and save a little bit of time here, so I've just created a little bit of a sort of enclosure here to do with the cow 2 setup, and I've then just obviously called it cow 2 enclosure. Now obviously if you're going to build something from scratch, I've just tried to use what I've got on the map already, so I'm not importing millions of different things and doing whatever else. Just trying to keep it nice and simple for the video. So when we work with the additional or the advanced animals sort of structure, we need to then build those parts in. Like I said earlier on, I wouldn't import, even though all of this stuff is set up already, I wouldn't import any of this sort of stuff into your map, because it's not the way that this is structured is just as examples. So the things like shaders and things like that will be possibly all screwed up once you bring them into the map, and you'll end up lots of errors and all sorts of other things. So I wouldn't do it that way. I would try and build it yourself. Now, what I found the easiest way for me, we already have, when you're working with the in-game animals at least, we already have all of our husbandry stuff set up, because if we click on our cow's husbandry, we have all of our user attributes in place, all of the gameplay stuff is in place, and this all matches what is in the examples. There's nothing any different in this particular case, because it's probably been taken from Goldcrest Valley anyway and then set up from that. So the only thing we will need to do is recreate a cow nav mesh, because that will be created under the wrong bit number, so we'll need to recreate a new one or create a new one. So what I would probably say is the easiest way to do this is to actually take what we already have. We're going to work with the cows, obviously. So with this one highlighted, I'm going to just go Control D on my keyboard, make a duplication of it, and then I can change my attributes and whatever else to suit our cow 2 setup. So with the transform group selected, I'm going to come up to the attributes window here, and under name, delete the S, and I'm just going to put a 2 in there, hit tab. So now this becomes cow 2 husbandry. In my user attributes, again with the main transform group selected, I'm going to change the type name from cow to cow 2, hit tab, lock in that change. Everything else there is going to be the same. The only thing we may need to adjust slightly is our straw plane min max, because we're elevating where it's all going to be positioned. This is much lower in the original position than it is over here. So we may need to have a bit of a play around with that, but that's fine. We can work with that when we get to it. So I want to keep the main transform group zeroed to the map. So all of the attributes up here are zeroed up here, and then we can just move the parts within as we need to. So if we work with all this stuff, again, our gameplay transform group is 0 to the map, so I want to leave that where it is, as is our tip triggers. So we're going to move each of the tip triggers manually, separately, until we need to get them wherever we need to get them. So you can always, in this particular scenario, because we already have this structure on the map, you can look at where all the parts are, and if you haven't changed the actual structure, like all the fences and everything else, besides the fact that they are now on a flat piece of ground, just to make it nice and easy for the video, the actual layout of the fences are exactly the same. The fence panels, they're exactly the same as what they are for the original setup, so all of the troughs and everything else will fit in the same place. So if I actually highlight this one, and remembering this is our duplication, so whatever we move from here, we're not going to affect the original ones. So with that one selected, I think this is where the feed one goes. So I'm just going to come over here with it selected, Control B, and we'll click, and it will bring it somewhere into position, and then I can just manipulate it with the gizmo to get it where I want it to get it. So we'll just come out a little bit to there. And obviously you can, spend a bit more time getting this positioned exactly where you want it to be, and all the rest of it. For the video, I'm just going to get it roughly where I want it. That'll be fine. There we go. So we've done that one already. So we're going to do our feeding cow inside, which we need the barn for. So for now, we're going to skip that one. We'll skip the straw one. We'll go down to our water trough, and that one comes over here because we have this really long fence panel set up. So I'm going to click on that one, Control B, and we'll click here. It'll put it somewhere close, and then I can just move it wherever I want to move it within to make it look like it's going to fit proper and all the rest of it. So just work with that, and as long as you can get to your trigger and everything and it looks good, there we go. Nothing too difficult there. So with that one done, we're going to then work with some other parts. So if we look at our visuals, again, the actual transform group or the gizmo is 0 to the map. I don't want to affect that in any way, so I'm just going to work with the visuals separately. So we have our cow stable, which is the main barn setup, and because I've kept all the other parts, the brushes and whatever else, I should theoretically be able to line this up with those. So I'm going to, again, with this selected, Control B, we'll click on the map, get it roughly where we want it to be, and then we can work with the other parts within. So we need to come forward quite a ways and get our brush bits lined up. So seem to be over this way too far. So if we come way over here, something like that, and then we'll just move this one back a little bit. Whoops. Again, I'm not going to worry about perfection for the video, just get it somewhere close as close as I can. So let's do 8, 9. What does that look like? Too far? Yeah. So 8. There we go, that'll be fine. And then we need to move this one. It's very difficult when you're trying to get stuff inside a building when the gizmo's not really positioned in the right place to work with it, but you know, that's just how it is. Sometimes you have to work with the actual attribute numbers to get it exactly where you want it, because you can't see everything on the screen. So let's move that something like that. What does our robot thing look like? Pretty good. Okay, so I'm just going to go with that. That's fine for this. And let's check our fence. Yeah, it looks alright. It's not clipping into the side of the building or anything. Good with that one. Okay, so now we've got that over there, we can work with our cow stable add-on, which is for our manure and slurry. Because the gizmo is centralized on the building, I'm able to use the Control B function again here, and we'll just get this into a position roughly where we want it. Now I've changed some bits slightly because the way that I wanted to have this set up, I've actually extended the fence right the way along, because I want to have this maybe a little bit further forward than it is originally, but that's just because of the way the ground tends to work. When you're changing the height of it and everything else, I wanted to have a bit more room to play around with, and we'll get it somewhere as close as we can. So if we just go 9, I don't know, that's too high, 5, 6, 7, 9, 5, yeah, something like that. Again, you may need to have a bit of a play with your attributes here just to get it as level as you can with the terrain and whatever else. Can be a bit tricky sometimes, but you know, just gotta mess about with it till you get it where you want it. Okay, so we'll go with that. I'm going to move this over a little bit. That'll be fine. Again, obviously for the video, just messing around here just to get the actual animals working and whatever else. When you get it all working, you can sort of finesse stuff a little bit later on, as long as it doesn't mess up with your structure of the nav mesh and whatever else. Things like this, I can move this wherever I want to. It's not going to affect anything within here, and I would have to recreate my heap and whatever else because it's a dynamic heap, but that's fine. I can, you know, it's not rocket science. So now that we've actually got these parts over, I can work with the other bits that we couldn't do until I had those buildings in. So we're going to work with our feeding area inside. So again, Control B, we'll click somewhere roughly where it's going to be, and then we can move it around. And because I'm using all of the in-game stuff, this is all set up specifically for these troughs, so it lines up exactly where it needs to be. I've not changed any of the angles or whatever else. If you obviously were having this on a bit of a tangent or a bit of an angle, it could be a bit more trickier, but I've not really played around with that stuff because I wanted to, again, make this relatively easy for the video. Stuff like that. So we'll just work with the plane here and just make sure it's going to be where I want it to be and it's going to look good. Best I can get it. Again, this sort of stuff comes in after you've got it all working, and you can play around with this to your heart's content later on. So let's something like that, something like that. And then I'm going to set this to something like that. There we go. Okay, so now what I need to do then is theoretically my attributes for the actual plane shouldn't have adjusted because it's built within this transform group, so it's applied within the transform group itself. But we'll just have a double check and make sure that it does work. So if we actually look at our feeding trough grass plane here, which is within this setup, we're going to take our move min y, which is at negative 0.23, which we've already seen because that's what it's set up at the moment. So if we take our move max y and make a copy of that, come to our feeding trough grass plane, change our translate y over to that number and see what it looks like when it's at its highest point. And that looks pretty good to me. Actually, no, it doesn't. There's a couple of bits there that are a little bit freaky from certain angles. So you might need to adjust it a little bit. Now, what I would suggest to do here, because of the way I've positioned this, don't move the plane, move the entire lot, because that's the way we've kind of brought it over as it is. So if we actually look at this one, we can then move this over just a little bit. Like so. Theoretically that should be okay. And if we go back to our grass plane, we'll have a look at that. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So if we click off of that, yeah, that's not too bad at all, I think. Looks pretty good. Okay, we'll go with that. So we'll set this back to what it was before. So if we come back into here, negative 0.23, and it will disappear back under the ground. Perfect. And then what we're going to do is animal places should be pretty good actually, because again we've brought everything over as it is, as is if you like. So, and it's all integrated within this setup here, so we shouldn't have to mess about with that too much. So they should be okay. You may need to move them around a little bit, but I would say they should be okay. It just depends. Sometimes they need to be adjusted, but other times they will work first time, and then that's just the way it is. We have our shovel catcher, that's fine, and we have our bale trigger set up there. Perfect. So that's all done. That one's okay. So we're going to do our cow stable straw trigger. So again, Control B, and we'll click somewhere roughly where it needs to be, and then we can move it wherever we want. So I'm going to set this to 113 because that's the height of the ground, or the terrain, or whatever you want to call it. And we can then work with our trigger here. So if we get that somewhere roughly in the right place, like so, bring it this way, get it roughly in the actual trough as best we can. So we'll go back just a little bit more. What does that look like? Maybe come that way just a tad. I think that looks okay. We'll work with that. We'll go with that. So that one's all set up. We've done our water trough. We've done our feeding trough. All the rest of it. Like I said before, we couldn't do the others until I brought those buildings into play. But now that we have all that set up, fantastic. So we've got all of that. Now our manure heap set up. If you actually look at this, you need to basically look at how the original one has been set up. So we have our actual transform group is placed in this corner, as is our start position, and then we have our width that goes at the back, and then our height that comes over here. So we need to basically match that within the structure of the new one. So if we zoom back over to this part, Now I don't particularly like the way that the dynamic heaps work. I would prefer to set this up with a moving plane, but I'm not going to get into messing about with that stuff because it may not work too well with the way that it's set up and with the way that the animal husbandry is set up, so we'll just stick with what we've got for this. So I'm going to use the interactive placement, so I'm going to go Control B. Now I've got the main transform group selected, and I'm going to click in this corner here like so. Might just manipulate it and move it around a little bit, and then we can check our start width, see where that goes to. Don't want it to be within the wall or anything, but that looks pretty good. And we check our height. Yep, that looks pretty good actually. Again, you might need to move that around once you get into the game and test it. You might need to adjust it a little bit, but I think that looks pretty good. Our liquid manure tank. This is actually zeroed to the plane, so we don't need to move everything within separately. We can just move the entire lot. So we can bring that over, but first of all what I want to do is change the terrain height here slightly, just so that it's not showing that grass. So what I'm going to do here is we'll click off of everything. I'm going to go Window, Terrain Editing, and I know that the terrain height here is 113 across this entire field. So I'm going to actually change this, and again this is something you'll have to have a bit of a play around with. So we'll go 112.5 and we'll see what that looks like. So I change my brush, my left mouse button over to replace, and that uses this function then. So I can go train sculpt mode, make my brush much smaller, and then we'll come in here and click, and we'll just see where we end up. Now I would have liked to have had a larger sort of base plate platform, and that's something that I probably would bring in if I was doing this for a map that I was going to be building. I would have a much larger base plate, because when you start to manipulate the ground like this, if you've got a very small base plate like what we've got here, sometimes what you'll find is the actual ground will start to dip outside of the base plate. What I mean by that is this base plate here that's attached. So you might find that you'll end up with sort of dips outside of the area that you want to create, and that's unfortunately just the way that the terrain sculpt mode works. It's not very sort of delicate in the way it kind of works. If we actually go under the ground and try and look at it, I don't know if we can or not. That actually doesn't look too bad in this particular case, but sometimes it's not as pretty as that, or whatever you want to call it. It's very jagged and very rough, and it can really screw up the ground terrain something bad. So you'll end up with dips outside here and all sorts of stuff. So I would increase the actual base plate by adding in an additional one and increase it out to here somewhere, and then maybe fill in this area as well. But luckily in this particular case it's not done that to me, so I've got away with it. I don't need to do anything there any further. So now that I've actually created my dip in the liquid manure tank there, I can bring over the plane. So we'll come back to our liquid manure tank, which includes our moving plane and everything else. Control B, and we'll click somewhere as close as we can to the middle of there like so. And then what I tend to do is just, with the entire lot selected, because this is built up as a structure, I can then bring it up a little bit, move the plane around within the actual tank if you like, and get it, you know, somewhere as close as you can to central like so, and then we can actually bring down our trigger again and whatever else like so. And then what you need to do again is just double check that your actual plane, your moving plane, is going to give you what you want in game. So if we actually look at our move min max Y, we have minus 0.9 as the lowest point. So if we can click on that, you can see we have minus 0.95. So if I click on 9, you can see it's actually too high now. So I'm going to actually take that information from there, come back to my liquid manure tank, and I'm going to then basically add a 5 in there, because that's all I need to do. Now it will be set up in the right setting. I don't know why they don't match, considering this is a Goldcrest Valley edit. Those numbers should have really been the same, but whatever. And again, you can test your plane to make sure it's going to go to the right height. So we had 0.8, so we'll go 0.8, and it moves up to the right height. Looks pretty good. So we can then reset that back to what it was before, minus 0.95. Perfect. So we have that all set up and in place. Excellent. We can bring over our straw plane. Remembering all of these are duplications of the original cow husbandry setup. So whatever we're moving here, we're not affecting the original cow husbandry setup. So again, with this selected, what I'll do is I'll actually go into the building a little bit, just so it places somewhere as close as I can get it. Select it, Control B, click. And because the actual gizmo is not central on it, it puts it all the way out there. But that's fine, we can just move it around as we need to. So we'll get this into a position best we can within the building here. And get it up close to the actual trough there. Something like that, I think looks pretty good. Then we can bury it slightly if we want to, like so. You can mess around with this, change your attributes and whatever else to suit. So we know that the ground level, the terrain height is at 113. So I can set this at 113 like so. Excuse me one moment. Throat got all dry there for a moment. Sorry about that. So if we actually come back to our cow2 husbandry transform group, you can see here we have a straw plane index, which is what is this. This is referring to that. And we have a straw plane min max y 89.8 to 90.1. So if we actually look at our straw plane index here, we can see at the moment it's actually set to 113. That's the highest I want it to display, like that. I don't want it to go any higher than that. So what I want to do is basically take that number from there, make a copy of that. We can go back into our cow2 husbandry transform group, and I'm going to paste that in. And I know that there's a difference between the original ones, which I believe will be that. I think that's right. We'll just double check that. So we've got 111 to 113. So if I go back, I've hit tab to lock that in, go back to our straw planes. If I now type in 111, you can see it's now under the ground. If I go 112, comes up a little bit further, and then 113, it's all the way up. So you don't want to go, too far down, because then the plane won't show up early enough or quickly enough. So might need to mess around with that a little bit and just get it perhaps maybe a little bit closer together, because that might be a little bit too far apart. So what I would probably say is to go maybe I'm just trying to think now what it could be. Let's do 112. Well, you can test it out by just adjusting the plane, I guess. So if we come into here and go 112.8, let's see what that looks like. That's not too bad actually. That's just under the ground slightly, so that might work a little bit better. So I'll probably go with that. So let's go 112.8. So let's take a copy of that, and then we'll come back to our cow2 husbandry and we'll paste that into there. Look, so make sure there's a space between the two numbers, otherwise it will get freaky, because it will think it's some random 112.8113, and then it will get really you need to put the space so it separates the min and the max basically. But everything else there is good. Our XML, we're going to, like I said earlier on the video, the one that comes with the examples doesn't work for in-game animals, so we're going to use the same cow husbandry XML that's already set up for our cows in the game as we have it now, so we don't need to adjust anything there. Everything else there is good. We need to set up our dirt areas. I'm going to delete the nav mesh because I don't want that, because I'm going to create a new one with a new bit. So we have our tip triggers in place. So if we look at those, you can see there are none in our original position because I've moved them all over. So we have our water trough, feeding trough, and indoor or cow inside or whatever that's called, feeding trough. Our manure heap area has been set up over here. Liquid manure tank has been set up over here. Our straw plane is set up in here. So we just need to work with our dirt areas. Now again, with the main transform group, it's set up 0 to the center of the map. So I'm going to just work with the second transform group, which is the one that has all of our start width and everything else. So with this one highlighted, I'm going to come down to here and find an area that I want to work with. So again, this is going to be with it selected, Control B, and we'll just click. And then what I can do is go through all of them to make sure that I'm in the right place. So I'm too far out. So if we come into this one, I'm going to go this way a little bit and then this way a little bit. If we look at the width, it's still too far out. So we're going a bit further, width. And that looks pretty good actually. So we'll just check our height, make sure that we're not too far this way. Maybe just a little bit. So we'll click on that one. And we'll go back that way just a little bit. Too far. So we'll come back just a little bit. There we go. Can be a bit, just have to mess about with it a little bit to get it in the area you want it to be. So let's have a look. Don't need to go that way just a little bit more. So make sure you have when you're moving it, if you want to move all of them as a whole, make sure you have the main transform group selected and then just move them as a whole. So we'll come back over here, just check our height. That'll be fine. We'll work with that. We'll work with that for the video anyway. So we have that set up now, our dirt areas, so when the animals are being a bit messy, they'll chuck all their food out all over the place and that'll be where it'll end up. Perfect. Now obviously you can get into all of the trigger markers and whatever else. I'm not going to do that for the video because it's just far too time consuming. We're already probably half an hour just doing this part. There is quite a lot involved. Again, setting up your area and whatever else. I think that by using the in-game cow husbandry in this particular case, just making a duplication of that is the easiest way to do it, at least in my experience. If you're going to try and recreate the entire thing by adding in all the user attributes yourself, I just think that's a little bit of a waste of time because they all match what we already have. The only ones that don't is basically the cow2 type name, and if you wanted to you could change your transform group to cow2 husbandry just so it splits them, but it's not required. You can call that whatever you want, but everything else is really just a duplication of that. So it's already in the game. Why go through the hassle of recreating all of this stuff manually when it's there for us? So yeah, so what we're gonna do then, I don't know, I've lost track of thought now. So we've got our visuals, let's just double check that. Yeah, we've got our cow silo. No, so we need to bring over our cow silo. Again, this isn't important, but I'm going to include it, why not? So with that selected, luckily the gizmo is zeroed on the actual cow silo. So again, I can go Control B, click, and bring it over somewhere like so. And we'll try and position this like, yeah, that'll do. Something like that. Then obviously you need to work with this and put your bits and pieces, your roads and everything else in, and whatever you choose to do there. Not going to get too involved with any of that stuff for this. Might do it at the end and then add it on at the end of the video so you can see what it looks like when it's done. But this is just an example map, if you like, a sample mod map to try and demonstrate how to get the additional animal stuff set up. And for me this is the easiest way, because you need a structure, you need some sort of structure to put everything together and have your nav mesh and all the rest of it. Otherwise it's just a jumble of buildings all over the place. that don't really correspond to anything, in my opinion, but you know. So, last thing what we need to do then is we need to create our nav mesh. Now, this is one of the trickiest things I found to do in Giants Editor. I don't think I've ever got one to work first time. You can get really lucky, and you know it will do what it needs to do straight off, and then other times it'll be a right pain. But I've never managed to get one work the first time. It's always taken me 2 or 3 attempts, and eventually it will start to do what it needs to do. So to create a new nav mesh, now because we're using cows and we're just basically duplicating everything we've got to do with cows, even though this is going to be a separate entity, if you like, it'll work completely separate to the original one. So when you buy one cow, it'll go in the other one. When you buy a cow 2, it'll come in this one. They're not going to be, you don't buy 10 cows and get 5 in this one and 5 in the other one. They are completely separate entities. So yeah, so I lost my train of thought again. Never mind, we'll move on. So nav mesh. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We're working with nav meshes, so the actual way we set these up need to be done in a specific manner. And because we're using the in-game cow stuff or setup, it's going to match what you would do for cows, other than the bit number. So cows would be set up at 0. We're going to set cow 2 up at 4, bit 4. So the way we do this is I'm going to change that back to add for my left mouse button. We'll come down to our info layer painting, and this comes back to the info layer GRLE that we messed about with earlier on in the video to up the amount of channels that we can have. So we've got 0 to 3, which is already being used. So I'm going to create cows 2 on bit 4. So what I need to do is make sure that I deselect 0 and select 4 on here. And then if I come into my terrain info layer painting mode, and then when it catches up with you, it can take a little while sometimes, it will then make everything look really dull and horrible, and then you can paint in your new nav mesh, and you just literally make your brush whatever size you want and just have at it, paint it on the map. So what we're going to do then is we're just going to do a rough nav mesh for now. Again, like I say, these are hit and miss at best in my experience, so I'm not going to spend too long on this. If it causes freezing animals and all sorts of stuff like that, then tough, that's something I would fix off camera. I'm not going to get into that because it'll take me days sometimes to get a nav mesh working exactly right. I'm hoping that because this is going to be on flat ground or flat level terrain, it's going to be a little easier, but I doubt it. So we'll get round to do this corner here, and we'll just roughly, again, like I say, paint this in, not too fussed for the video sort of setup, just so I can show you that it does actually work and you do get animals spawning on the nav mesh and they do move around and do what they need to do. And obviously you can go fancy and have different things within your area, so you can bring in barrels and trees and whatever you want to do. I'm not going to do that for the video. So we'll do all of that like so. Then we'll come over to here and just add in something there like that. There we go. And then we'll just add in a bit through the here like that. And we'll do something in here as well. Again, when you're working in buildings, it can be right pain to get the camera exactly where you need it to be to work, but it is what it is. So we'll go up to the trough as close as I think I need to here. What I might do here is just change over to the square brush, just so I can judge it a little easier visually, like so. Now sometimes I have found when I've tried to do this in the past, the nav mesh just will not play ball, it will not do what it needs to do. And I've had to move the entire building structure, even just a small amount, so that I can actually apply the nav mesh in the right area for it to then work 100%. So you may find that you'll run into the same problem. You'll put your nav mesh down and it, no matter how many times you try to do it and you think you've got everything exactly the way it needs to be, it just will not work correctly, and you'll just have many freezing animals and all sorts of stuff. And I've had to then literally grab the entire building structure, move it literally just a small amount, redo my nav mesh, and it will then work perfectly. First time, no problem. But it's taken me 10 attempts to get to that point, if you know what I mean. So it can be one of those things that is just a right pain. And I want to use other words, but I'm not going to do that for the video. So we'll just do this, and we'll just sort of come across here like that, and like that. There we go, fill that in. And then we'll just kind of do something here like that, and a little bit in here somewhere. Like that. I tend to find that it's better if you have a smaller brush and have to cover a larger area when you're painting with a smaller brush than try and work with a really big brush. You might think, oh, I'll make my brush really big, I'll be able to cover like masses of areas, and sometimes you can do that, but I tend to find you working with the smaller brush can give you better results when working with the nav mesh. But you know, go with whatever works for you, I guess. So right, what we'll do then is, now that I've created that, remembering that we set this up with bit code 4, we're going to go into create nav mesh. Now there's not much you need to change in here. The radius for cows is 1.2, so we're going to change that. Everything else there can stay the same. The only thing we need to change is our culling info layer channels. Forget what the number is in here. You need to actually click on this little box thing here, the little dot, because this is our actual bit, as it says here, bit mask, and that's what that refers to. So you have different numbers in here, and the bit mask is all of these bits and pieces here, and then you have the hexadecimal, and so you have the hex and decimal, or however that is. So for the bit mask we have 0, but we want to change that, so I want to take the 0 out of there and go to 4, and you can see then our bit mask is 10 on the hex, and bit mask is 16 on the decimal. So just make sure you deselect the 0 first, or whatever that may be, up to 3. Deselect that first, and then select the channel that you want to apply your cows to. So say for example I had I didn't want to set it to 4, I wanted to set it to 6. When I paint down my nav mesh, I must make sure in my info layer painting section here, my info channel is set to 6 in here when I paint it down. And then once I've painted it down and I'm happy with it, I can go into create nav mesh. When I come into here, I must make sure that I come into this culling layer channels box and select 6 in here as well, and only 6, no other number. In this case I set up as 4, so I'm going to select 4, click OK, and that's it. And then all we need to do is click create, because we're creating an entirely new nav mesh. If you were editing a nav mesh, you would make your edit under the right bit code, under the right bit mask, or whatever it's called, info channel, and then you come in here, choose your info channel within the culling info section, set your radius up, and then click recreate, because you're not creating a new one, you're recreating the one that you've already done, and you're just editing it. But in this particular case, we're actually creating an entirely new nav mesh. So I go create, and it then tells me that it's done. It's got X amount of triangles and all the rest of it. I can now click off of my terrain info layer painting mode, and it disappears. But if I right click in the middle here and go show nav mesh is. That's our nav mesh. So for this particular area, you can see that the nav mesh has been created. Whether it will work or not, who knows. Might need to come a little closer to the troughs. That's something that you'll need to play around with and work with. If we had any kind of small objects within the nav mesh when we created it, as long as they are set up correctly with the right collision masks, then our radius that we had set for 1.2, it would see the object and then create a pocket in the nav mesh with a radius of 1.2, so that the nav mesh then isn't created where that object is, so you don't have animals walking through trees and stuff like that. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Just have to play around with that as well. Nav meshes, they're a pain, they really are. Okay, so we have all of that set up, fantastic. But now our nav mesh is all the way down here. We don't want it there, we want it up here. So highlight it, Control X to cut it, go into your Cow 2 husbandry, go into your gameplay, highlight it, Control V to paste it in. And if you actually look at your cow husbandry setup, you should have in here nav mesh index is 00, but at the moment it's actually 05. So our tip triggers are 00. So what you need to do then is right click it and go move up until it gets to the top of this section within the gameplay, so it then becomes 00. Can't leave it at the bottom because the index path won't match otherwise. So we need to then, if we go back to this one, you can see our nav mesh index is 00. If we click on it now, you can see it's 00. Perfect. Everything else now is done. We've set it all up. We've got our Cow 2 husbandry set up in here. That's fine. We've applied all the appropriate parts to do with moving planes and our type name and whatever else. There's no other parts in here that need to be adjusted for that sense. The only other thing that we do need to do is create a new animal loading trigger. So if we come into here, we have our animal loading trigger for cows, and you can see that that's got the animal type in there of cow. And all you need to do there is just go Control D to make a duplication of it. With it selected, we'll get into a better position here. If you don't obviously do this, you won't be able to put your cows 2 into the building. So with it selected, Control B, and we'll click, and then we'll just position it where we want it. So if we just do something like that, might just come up a little bit, there we go, something like that. And then I can change the actual name in the attributes window. So we'll go Cow 2, tab, lock that in, and I need to change my animal type to Cow 2 as well, lock it in, perfect. Because I'm only adding in Cow 2, there's not much more I need to do there. We can close all that down. I'm pretty sure, is the dealer in here? Yes, the dealer is in here as well. So if we come over to here, we have our animal dealer, and you can see we've got pig, sheep, cow. So all I need to do in here is go Cow 2, hit tab, lock it in. I can now purchase my cows from here. Well, I will do once I get the actual scripting set up. I'll be able to purchase my Cow 2 from here, as well as all the other animals, and deliver them to my Cow 2 husbandry setup. Perfect. Hopefully I haven't gone too fast, or it's got really confusing. There is quite a lot involved. The actual mod itself, and I'm not going to call it a mod again, there's not much to it as such, but it's the actual building of all the parts that go with it that need to be put together, and that's the time consuming part. Putting all your fence pieces in, and your troughs and your feeding pieces and all the rest of it, and your whatever else you're going to apply to it. You may not want to go that far. You may just want to have a big field like this. I wouldn't recommend it, but you might want to just have a big field like this, completely open, couple of troughs, and a big nav mesh in the middle. Bang, done. You could do that if you wanted to. I've had it, but I would probably say that something like this with a structured setup with slightly smaller nav mesh might be a better option. It's great to have more nav meshes in the game. I'm curious to see if we then get into 4x maps and 16x maps with God knows how many nav meshes created all over the place, what the performance of the actual map will be. Especially if it's like, you know, a 16x map with massive great nav meshes all over the place. Not quite sure what that's going to do for performance, but anyway, whatever. For now, this is what I'm going to do, and I hope that the actual tutorial here so far has been informative. If nothing else, I'm going to turn off the nav meshes because I don't need to see them. So we've got all that set up in there as well. Fantastic. Again, like I said before, you could spend time putting down all of your markers, these things. If I can find, if we come back over to this one here, went past it. You can put all your markers down and stuff like that. Obviously, you know, visually, you know you're going to come over to the trough and put in some sort of substance into there. You know you're going to come to this trough and put something into that one. But for your actual animal loading trigger, if you didn't know it was there, you might not be able to find it quite so easily. So perhaps maybe trigger markers were, for that particular setup, might be, you know, a good thing. But for the rest of it, I tend to turn them off, actually, if I'm honest. I find them really annoying. But once I find everything on the map and I know where it is, they just get turned off. But so we'll just come back over it. I'm pretty sure I don't need to do too much or anything else in the map now. It's just about setting the scripts up and whatever else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm going to grab a drink because I'm getting really dry in the throat again. And then we'll have a look at the scripts and bits and pieces from there. Okay, so back on the desktop again. If I open up the map folder here, we'll have a look at the actual scripts and whatever else. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to create a new folder, I think. Let's just do it here, that's fine. So we'll just create a new folder, and I'm going to call this scripts. And I'm just going to copy all of that stuff over into there like that. And then I'm going to go into the mod desk. So we'll open up the example one here. And I'm just going to take what I need from there and then put into the mod desk for the map. You can clearly see this is just a sample mod map that I've put together. There's nothing else in here at all, so we'll create some lines. And I'm going to take the extra source files all the way down to the advanced animal type stuff. Make a copy of that. Come over and we'll paste it in like so. And then I'll just delete the bits on the bottom so it looks a bit tidier. So we can have our, if we have a look through this, we've got our cow 2, which is our animal type, which is registered down here. All of the statistic parts are down here, so you have grass, bulk, power, and my feed, which is an additional one in this particular case. Excuse me, so you have all your other stuff: grass, windrow, dry grass, windrow, silage, power, food, and forage. And in this case we have wheat and barley as an additional one for this particular animal setup. You can do what you want with that. Some parts over here that you can have a play around with. When I actually put this into a map, just to, you know, have a bit of a play around with it and get my head around everything, I figured, you know, breeding cow, but I just want to set it up as a breeding cow. So I actually changed some parts. So we have over here, milk per day is 714. If you change that to 0, you will get no milk from these cows at all. They will not produce any milk. So have a look through that and see what you think on that. You can change all your bits in here. So if you want less or more manure, less or more liquid manure. None of this other stuff is relevant because that's for other types of animals. So your pallet fill level, stuff like that. If you take from like Hofbergman or whatever else, where you have like the chicks and things like that, you could have pallets of chicks, and then that would be appropriate if you're registering chicks, and things like that. So pick up objects per day would be eggs if it's relevant to chickens, and so on and so on and so on. So all of these parts in here you'd need to look through and just work out what is applied for the animal type, the animal husbandry type that you're actually going to work with. So that's that. And then adjust all of these parts to work with that as well. So Perhaps maybe for sheep you wouldn't want to have wheat and barley as a feed, so you'd need to adjust that, and so on and so on. But that's something you need to have a bit of a play around with to then work with all of that stuff. And again, the price and whatever else you need to have a bit of a play around with to get all that set up. And this would need to be changed to work with sheep and whatever. But you know, I'm not going to get into all of that. I'm just going to work with this just for the video. So anyway, that's all the parts we need to have in there. I'm going to change this because I haven't got it in that setup. I've just got it in scripts, so I'm going to delete that. So I've just got scripts and then the advanced animal types lure and scripts advanced animal table lure. There is some stuff in here which was for English, but I can't remember. I think if I remember rightly, that says this needs to be at the top of the extra source files structure. So basically, if you have loads and loads of other scripts on the map, these scripts need to be at the very top of it. So if I had something like the additional map type script, reg field type script, and so on and so on, they would need to be below these two. These must be at the top of your script structure in your extra source files. I'm pretty sure that's what that says, but I translated it last time. But Google is your friend. I'm sure if you translate that, it will come up with something similar to what I've just said. So we're going to click save if it lets me. There we go, and we've got all of that stuff into there. Don't need that anymore. It gives you some other different examples up here for your other animals. So you've got cow 2, pig 2, sheep 2, and all the bits and pieces in there that would need to be adjusted for those appropriate animals. So I'm going to close this down. Don't need that anymore. I'm just trying to think what else I need to do. I'm pretty sure when I played around with this before, let's have a look, because if I go into here, yeah, you need to actually, depending on where you put the scripts, if you actually create a folder called animal scripts, so this is one of the things that I actually did find, just to go over it. You have a folder here called animal scripts, right? Which is fine, but if you want to actually have many other scripts on your map, which a lot of them do now have a lot of scripts in, you might not want to call your scripts folder animal scripts. You might want to call it scripts like I have, or something else, lure, whatever you want to call it. But then when you do that, obviously in the scripts themselves, they're looking in a specific folder called animal scripts. So what you'll need to do is come into the actual script itself and change the path file name in here, otherwise it won't work. So I'm going to actually delete that, and I'm going to delete that. So we've got scripts and then those parts there, and we can go ahead and save. I'm pretty sure that was the only one I needed to do when I did this before, but we will have just a look through the other parts. Those are XMLs, that's fine. And this one, I'm pretty sure there was nothing in there I needed to change. And this gives you examples here again for your animal types and your HUD directories and bits and pieces in there, but I think that's just for cow 2 again, just an example. But I don't remember anything in there that needed to be changed, so we should be good there. Okay, so I guess the next thing, like I've always said in the past, when you get to a certain point, the easiest thing to do is just put it into a mod folder, get it running in game, and see what errors you get, because you will find that you'll get to a point where you're just going over the same thing again and again and again. If you put it into a mods folder, get it into game, you might find that you've done everything right the first time round and it'll have no errors whatsoever and it'll work perfectly, apart from nav meshes which never work properly. But other than that, you should be pretty good. If you do get errors, just quit out the game, figure out what the errors are, go into your log text, so you can go into your farm sim installation folder, wherever that may be, and in the bottom here you've got a log text in there. If you open that up, it will then basically tell you any errors that you've got, and whatever else for your last run session. So, you know, I would probably say that that's a good idea to have a bit of a look in there if you are having any problems. So if you've got any errors and things like that, go in there and figure out what they are, and then come back into the editor and fix what needs to be fixed. Or it may be a line of text that you've forgotten to put into the mod desk or whatever else. Or it may be something to do with the structure of these path file names to these scripts. It may be the fact that you've buried them under 10 other scripts at the bottom of the extra source files tags and then not read what that said there, and that's what's causing the problem. Don't know, but I'm going to do that anyway. I'm going to put this into a mod folder. I'm going to get it into game, and then we'll see if we can actually purchase some animals, some cows 2 or cow 2 or whatever it's called. Probably not going to mess around with trailers, not in this particular video, and I'm more than likely not going to mess around with the other animals. I just wanted to do a video on how to work with the additional animal stuff and get it all into the map and set it up for a animal, and then I'll let you just, you can have a play around with the rest of it. Hopefully the video will give you some direction to go in, at least, if nothing else. So last thing we need to do then is, because I've changed the actual folder structure, or whatever you want to call it, of the scripts, I've also changed the position of the HUDs and everything else, because this was normally in animal scripts. So we need to go into our mod desk again and just change those appropriate parts. So obviously this is animals underscore scripts. I've just got it in my scripts folder, so I'm going to change that one, and I'm going to change that one, so it now says scripts animal HUDs scripts animal store, and then go ahead and save. While I'm here, I'm actually going to just change this so I do get a map preview. Not that it's really that important, but I just like to have it there, so we'll change that path file name as well. There we go, and then that's that. So that should now point to scripts animal HUDs and then animal store. We should get all the information we need from there. So that's that, and then we'll get into game and have a bit of a play around with it. Okay, so I've had a bit of a play off screen and added some colour into the map, a bit of dirt here, a bit of grass here and things like that. I also put the field back in. I got rid of the entire field originally because I wasn't entirely sure how big I was going to make the actual cow 2 husbandry setup. So I've added the field back in. I think it looks quite nice like that, where you've got the cow husbandry set up and then this big field 31 sort of goes around the outside of it, if you like. You can do what you want with that, I guess. If you're going to do a similar setup to what I've done here, I would probably grass it or put some corn in it to create some chaff to put in the silo and whatever else. It kind of completes it, if you know what I mean. So it's just not one big empty space. Now theoretically, if I was going to bring in or create some extra husbandry setup, so have like maybe my sheep and pig in this area as well, then that field wouldn't work quite so well. But it just depends on play styles, I guess, really, whether you want all your animals in one place or whether you want them to be separated about the map and things like that. Different people have different play styles, and all the rest of it. And obviously, you've got your animal market just there, because originally I was going to I might still do a trailer, not sure yet. I'm going to have to see how long this has all gone on for, because it's probably gone on for way over an hour already, but we'll see what we can sort of come up with. I might create a trailer and do that in a separate video. I don't know yet. We'll see how we end up. But I've got the field here, so this is field 31. If we go over to the field, so you've got your field here. All the hired worker and everything else works because I've tested it. We get missions on this field. I've set it up that particular way. I've set it all up in GE. So you can do whatever you can do. Really, when you're doing this sort of stuff, you can have a bit, play around with some bits and pieces. Possibly I would want to set up some sort of fast teleport sort of thing. So in here you can click on like your cows, so your pigs up there, your cows, whatever else. I might want to set something up so that I could fast teleport to that area, to the cow 2 pasture, whatever else, breeding cow pasture, whatever you want to call it. But that's something else you can do as well within the map01 XML and what have you. I'm not going to get into that in the video here, but this is really more about the additional animals and getting that side of things working. I've got some equipment here. I've got some straw bales, hay bales. Not going to get into messing around doing silage and all that sort of stuff just for this. And I've got some water and whatever. So you can see, we've got the actual pasture. Now I was going to set this up like I did in my testing one where it didn't create milk, but I figured, whatever. Doesn't really matter. You can change that. I've shown you in the mod desk where you can just set that to 0, and then it will, the breeding cows then won't produce milk if that's what you want to do. And I kind of like, had a bit of a play around with the map, so I've created a drive piece around the back here so you can get up around there and, go around the outside of the actual thing here and get round to all your troughs and all the rest of it and what have you. I went a bit mad with it, but, I think it looks pretty like this. So just bringing you guys into the map where it was completely bare and there was nothing there, just didn't look right, and it's not my sort of style really. So if I can help it, if I got time, I'll try and make it look a little bit more presentable where I can. Anyway, so what we'll do then is if I go into the escape menu, obviously the PDA map thingy here won't match in perfectly because you've now got extra buildings where there were none. So if you've got your map like so, it's going to show me field 31 down the bottom right there on the PDA, but obviously it's not now an entire field. It's got this cow 2 husbandry set up in it, but field 31 still exists because I put it back in. So if you're going to do this sort of thing, obviously you may need to have a play around with your PDA map and edit that somewhat to make it represent the actual farm and all the rest of it and what have you, but not going to do that in this particular setup because I've, like I said, I've put the field back in, so it does still represent, to a point. It's as accurate as it can be. There is still a field there, so that's fine. And if we actually use the escape menu map overview here, you can clearly see the field 31 is there, and we now have this piece which is to do with our cow 2 husbandry and all the rest of it, and you go through all the standard sort of stuff with your what have yous. Yeah, so that's fine. Not really going to mess about that too much. If we cycle on through round to our animals, we've now got pig, sheep, and we've now got the new one, breeding cow, and all the appropriate parts in here. Now obviously if you had a play around, and we've got our standard cows over here, if you had a play around in the mod desk, set your milk tank or milk per day to 0. It will still show milk tank, I believe, but this will then be blanked out. There'll be nothing there. If I remember rightly, I can't remember, but it blanks this out sort of thing, so that no longer shows that any milk will be produced. If you don't want to have the milk there, I mean, you've got milk from your standard cows. So the way I did this in my previous run through, I went with the idea that breeding cows weren't there to produce milk, they were just there for the breeding process, and then I would just give them all the appropriate foods and water and whatever else, and then take the offspring or the bred animals or whatever it does to the market for sale, and then not take the milk. But I still had the liquid manure from it, because that's just another added bonus really. So, and we've got in this particular setup the additional of the wheat and barley as well as all the other bits and pieces. So yeah, that's there, and it looks great. It's another added function to this particular setup. Fantastic. Does it work though? That's the main question. If we get rid of that map there, so if we come on round to where our trigger is, again, like I said earlier on the video, I haven't put any markers down or anything like that, but I know where I put the trigger. So we'll come in here, F1 menu, and you can see we have our open dialog. If I back out, it goes away. So that's where the trigger is there. I knew that because that's where I set it up. So we press R, breeding cow 5,000. Fantastic. I've cheated in a load of money so I can just buy some. So we've got our breeding cow, so we'll just go buy. Let's just get, I don't know, maybe 50. I don't know, something like that. Let's do 50. And we'll confirm. And yes. And there we go. So NavMesh is working to a degree so far. We've got our cows spawned in. They're moving around. They're doing all their thing. And this comes back to that XML I was talking about earlier on. The one that is comes with the actual download. That is just an example for other animals, not that aren't related to the giants ones, like the cow, pig, sheep, all that sort of stuff. Don't know how to set that up yet. I haven't got a clue. The locomotive, or whatever it's called, XML, we don't have access to that, so again, I'm not sure how to link all that stuff in, so I'd like to be able to have set up like goats and things like that in this particular fashion with a proper nav mesh, but I just don't have access to that information yet, and I don't know how to create it myself, so just sticking with the standard setup and whatever else for now, and then when hopefully somebody else comes out with that, I can have a look into it then a bit further and see what was actually needed to get all that set up. So we have our cows, they're walking around, they're doing the thing, they may freeze, they may not, I have no idea yet. Can take a little while sometimes, usually when one gets close to a trough, so it's only when you start actually giving them food, they go over to the trough and then that's when they freak out and start freezing and do all sorts of weird things. But we'll just see how that works, they may do, they may not, I don't know yet, we'll just have to wait and see what happens with them. At the moment they seem to be okay. So yeah, I'm just going to very quickly, hopefully very quickly, grab the water trailer here. Let's do this, and we'll come over to here, and hopefully this works. Get off the trough. There we go. So we'll press our I key. It's unloading, and there we go. We have our water plane coming up. That's one of the moving planes that I didn't actually adjust, to be fair. So it may go too high. I don't remember what it was set to originally or how it was set up, but it looks like it's going to be okay, so that's good. And again, with the water trough mod that I did a video on previously, you should be able to add it to this one as well, as long as you set it up for the correct animal type. So in that video showed how to set it up for cow, I think it was sheep actually. So in this particular case you'd use the cow 2 as an animal type, and then that would work with this as well. So you could use the water trough mod with this as well, because it works with the husbandry setup. Should have no problem. I haven't tested it, but it should work fine, at least as far as the in-game animals go, because it's using the XML for the cow husbandry, so it should work fine. So let's see if I can do this, because I'm absolutely useless with these things, but we'll have a bit of a play and see what I can mess up here. Should really put them on the floor, I guess. That might be easier, but let's see if we can take it off of this. So let's bring that up a little bit. I have to do this out of cab because I can't do it in cab. Sorry about that. So let's grab one of these, if it will. Oh, I know why. I haven't released them yet, that's why. So let's do that. There we go. That should be better now. There we go, that's better. So we'll grab this. Oh, knew that was going to happen. Oh, never mind, whatever. So, well, I'll just do one of each, so I'll just show you that the actual triggers do work as far as that goes. I was going to test the silo and everything, but obviously I think the video's dragged on for way too long as it is, so we'll just come over here. There we go. That one works fine. So we'll just grab a straw bale, and I don't have anything on the map ready to go to actually create what I need to make TMR and all that sort of stuff. Well, I do actually, because I have hay and straw here, but I just can't be bothered to do it, if I'm absolutely honest. I just want to show you that base triggers work for this side of things, and then you can, when you play around with this, you can get all that other stuff sorted out. So bales, hate the damn things. So we'll just test this one out for our straw and see what that does. Hopefully our plane is going to work okay. I can't remember. Get out of there. There we go. No, straw plane comes up. Fantastic. So that's working okay as well. Is that cow frozen? Yeah, that cow's frozen. So yeah, so I need to have a bit of a play around with the I split this one as well. Yeah, there you go. So I need to have a bit of a play around with the nav mesh. That's pretty much standard. I think in every single time I've ever done a nav mesh, it's never ever worked first time straight away. It's always done this to me. So that's just part and parcel. I've expected that, but I'll have a play with the nav mesh and see what I can do that. But if your nav mesh freaks out, don't think I've done something wrong, because they just are a right pain to actually get them to work 100% perfect, and not having your animals freezing. It's not, you know, it's just the way that they work. They're just a nightmare. And if we then go into the animal page again here, so breeding cows, you can see now that the cleanliness stuff works. They've producing liquid manure, got 50, it shows that. And we have straw and silage, hay. I put hay in there, but that's fine. And so on and so on. So if I was to get some power food or total mix rations and all that sort of stuff and put that in, then all of that would work as well. So, you know, after a certain amount of time, productivity will change, I would imagine. Just speed up a bit of time here and see what happens. There you go. So all of that stuff is working, it's doing its thing. Our production rate is showing up. We're getting some milk, getting some manure, and all the other parts there. So all of that is actually doing what it's meant to do. It is working to a degree. It's just the nav mesh is a bit freaky, and I need to look into that. But and you can see obviously where we set our dirt areas up, that is now working as well. It's throwing out the whatever onto the ground, so grass, I guess that is, I don't know. But it is working, you know. Forget the nav mesh issue. That's just, like I say, one of those things. But everything else is doing its thing, what it needs to do. So yeah, I'm getting very tired now after doing this video, so I'm going to end it here. I'm ShyWizard, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.